My English name is Gerry Hope. My Tlingit name is Jachek. I am of the Eagle moiety, and we claim the killer whale and the brown bear crests. I am Siknakadi from Wrangell and come from the Red Clay House. My father's clan was Kiksudi. That makes me Kiksudi Yeti. He was of the Raven moiety from the Frog Crest, and he came from the Point House. I am Kagwantan Dutchkan. Wanted to lead off with that just a little bit, mainly because the kind of topic that we're going to talk about is a topic that we had been talking about for a couple of clan conferences, and for one reason or another, this ended up being the first time we were able to present this topic. I'm pleased to be joined on the panel by Nora D Dauenhauer and Jeri Museth. Jeri Museth is with Tlingit and Haida Central Council, and I will have her do her own introduction that speaks to the kind of background that she has and what skills that she has that lends a real important part to this panel this morning. Nora is a critical component because she will add the cultural component. And so we're really pleased to be joined by these two people. Later on, there's a couple of people that I want to bring forward in this morning's session that have already been presenters from Canada. This morning's topic was purposely left broad. Breaching the topic, impact on Alaska Natives from contact to today and tomorrow. There have been any wide range of areas, and probably there has been no area that has not been impacted on us as Alaska Natives. We can look at probably the number one reason why we have been impacted, and that's because of the resources of the land. The sea otters, the fish, the trees, the minerals, the oil. If you look at any one main reason why we have been impacted, it was because of the effort to extract all those resources by a dominant society, a dominant culture. And for a long time, it wasn't viewed very positively, and it can be argued to today that it is still not viewed positively, that Alaska Natives, specifically we Tlingit, the Haida, Tsimshian, speaking to our own area of the world, are impediments to accessing and having those resources. As a result, there have been a wide range of areas to either exterminate or get the First Nations people out of the way in order to extract those resources. So when we are talking about the herring situation, for example, there's a herring spawn going on right now in Sitka, and there's a big fight. And it has been a prolonged fight between the indigenous people who depend on that resource for food, the herring eggs and the herring themselves, as opposed to the commercial industry who make money off of it. And so what is the balance? I know that those in Sitka have never really wanted to shut down in terms of the industry unless the population of herring is threatened. There's going to be some discussion about that later on. So I won't get into that discussion. But today, there is an act that's a clear example of the conflict that goes on between a First Nations people in terms of a resource and a culture, and the dominant culture trying to extract that resources for the purposes of making money. That's one example in terms of resources. Many other examples, culture, and that's why I'm so glad that Nora, when I asked her if she would sit on this panel, can speak to the impact of westernization from contact to today on our culture. What impact has it had on our ceremonies? What impact has it had on our language? What impact has it had on, and it's not necessarily negative, because there have been additions. For example, we didn't have buttons as a people for a long time. There have been some additions that have beautified, were seen positively. And Nora here is going to speak to that. Another major component about the impact of from contact to today is abuse of self, abuse of others. Jeri has experience in that field and sees the kind of impact. We are all familiar with the kinds of self-abuse and abuse of others. And also, it's not necessarily negative there either. There's also positive roles and positive directions that many of us have taken. And Jeri is here to speak to some of that. So those are major areas that we wanted to talk about. And in a certain sense, it pulls together a number of topics that have been going throughout the Clan Conference so far and will continue throughout the rest of today and into tomorrow. But speaking of tomorrow, we really want to talk about not what has been our plight, not we are such victims kind of discussion, or not that we rule kind of discussion, but what has been, what is, and more importantly, what can we do to improve ourselves as First Nations people into tomorrow? Yes, for our children. Yes, for our grandchildren. But yes, also to those who are not born yet. It is for those who are not born yet that we need to be able to peek into that future and ask ourselves the ownership question and make a design, make a plan that we can follow through on to have a positive impact on those who are not born yet. So I am going to work towards having this as a topic in future Clan conferences also. With that, I want to ask you to give a warm welcome to Nora DDauenhauer.
Gunalchish. My name in English is Nora Dauenhauer. In Tlingit, when I went home in Huna and Haines, where my grandfather's from, Huna's from my father's village. So I'm Hunakau Yadi. At the same time, I'm Chukunedi Yadi. Keichne Yuchato SOK. I am named Keichne. The name comes to me from my grandfather. He gave me this name because it was his mother's name. My grandfather, my father's father. And he came from Haines. So my name is very special to me because it comes from my grandfather's people. And my father's village is very special to me too. I always go home periodically to Huna because that's where I grew up. And my mother came from Yakutat, Elsik River, and they came from Canoe Prow House, Shakahit. I'm from there also. So my life is very complicated, but I'm very happy it is, because I have to learn a lot about it. I love all the places that my family come from. I think I'll stop there and start talking about the impact of becoming Americanized. I don't remember becoming Americanized at first. It was very good thing to learn English. I went to school when I was 8 years old, and I got impacted right there. I'm sure other kids did too. I hear stories similar to mine. I was trying to fit in. See, my family spoke nothing but Tlingit, and we grew up on a boat. So being Tlingit, we just spoke Tlingit all the time, whatever we were doing. And I ended up being punished for speaking Tlingit in classrooms that I was in. And that was the biggest impact. I still remember the spanking I got from the teachers who couldn't learn Tlingit. I learned it. Why couldn't they have learned it? Why couldn't they have been generous to the kids that were my classmates who taunted me because I could speak Tlingit too? Because the teacher was punishing me for being what I am. Anyway, in the long run, they didn't learn. And I dropped out of school when I was 16 because that was the age you could drop out. Anyway, the impact on language has been very big, very, very big, because our language carries each of our culture, our food. We know them in Tlingit. We know where we get them in Tlingit. We know where we get all our food, and we know how to work on them and fix them up for winter. This all is coming down to us through our language. Our language carries all of the information that has to do with our food. Our ceremonies are carried in the language. Everything that is done in a ceremony, whether it's memorial, 40-day party, house raising, anything totem pole raising that is done because we know it in Tlingit. Although we're doing it in English now, we still know it because our language carries the way to handle all of these. are spiritual people. Shamans knew a lot. They could communicate with each other miles away from each other. There were good ones, super good ones, and some that weren't very good ones. But they still had this ability to communicate spiritually. And that went with our language. We don't know too much about it because the first Navy boat that came to Sitka got a hold of one of our shaman and scrubbed him and cut his hair, then let him go. These shameful things that the Americans did to us is what impacted us. Our names, our wonderful names we have to document today to continue giving our names to children that are being born, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And if we don't have these, we're going to have to make up our names of things that happened to us. I want to name my granddaughter, my great-granddaughter, $7 million. You can make up names like that. What is the mileage or the land that we got from the land claims?
The mileage?
Uh-huh.
$1 billion.
1 billion? Wow. 1 billion would be a good name too. Wow. I'll give that to myself. The spiritual is what it really hurts to know that the spiritual people are no longer among us. We kind of imitate it, but we know they're gone. Our names, like I said, are very important and should be documented. Again, I say this. Our fishing is overfished like the herrings that is going on right now. There are just so many people and so much is taken. That is an impact and a half. Our burying places, we can no longer go out the road like we used to. We used to go out and in every community, go out the road and pick berries. You can't do that anymore. And if nobody is living there, people spray that. And we don't know what content is in the spray. So we can't pick berries just from anywhere. Our dry fish camps, they say we abandoned them. But we went there seasonally. We have a dry fish camp. Our clan has a dry fish camp up in Chilkoot Lake. And it has a dry fish house, a Anhidi dry fish house, smokehouse. And it has 3 cabins that one of our friends donated to us. We go up there once in a while, and once in a while, people will rent that place for meeting, workshops, and stuff like that. But that we still know that this is a very spiritual place for us because it gives us a good feeling. Our songs, we know just a few songs, and we're losing the ownership of the songs, and it was treated with respect because there was knowledge where each song came from. And we respected that ownership. But we're losing that also. Our peacemakers are no longer among us. We have made peace, but I don't know how much we know about it. I know I don't know too much about it, so I can't really talk about it. In the peacemaking dance, there's spiritual dances, Shakiat Gangush, and at memorial potlatching, we had laments. We call these in Tlingit qaq tashiyi, lament songs. We're losing those also. Charlie Joseph recorded a bunch of Yake songs, which is really good, and he named with them the ownership of the song. Peacemaking songs, we're losing those. And that's about it I can say.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you.
We're going to have a little bit of a dialogue, not right now. There's one more presenter, and then I wanted to bring in a couple of other people, and then we're going to look forward into the future as best that we can. And so I wanted to bring your attention to the handout that we distributed this morning. It's double-sided, and one that I want to start out with in terms of a reference with you is the historic events that have influenced Alaska's Native people. And then on the back, there's something titled The Grieving Cycle as a Community Development Tool. I myself am not familiar with this aspect of healing necessarily in terms of the grieving process. But I know that Jeri is. I'll leave that up to her. What I wanted to do is just say some broad brush stroke things before I call on Jeri to speak. In the historic events that have influenced Alaska's Native people, you can see it starts from 1874. Of course, it begins way before then. And then it goes through 1991. Of course, we're here in 2009. But these are in this particular author who put this together. It's their view of what they feel based on their field of work, highlight events that have impacted us as Alaska Native people. One thing that I did want to include, you'll notice that 1912 there was a volcano that went off. That volcano that went off was called the Alaska Native Brotherhood. Oh, it says Katmai Volcano there. Alaska Native Brotherhood was founded in 1912. The Alaska Native Brotherhood was something of an instrument that particularly the Tlingit used as a modern organization at that time to work through systematically and address harms that the American government had implemented against Alaska Natives. Keep in mind that the Russians, whom claimed that they owned the land that in terms of boundary and acreage, claimed a lot more than they actually did. For example, in Sitka, if you go to the Isabella Miller Museum, you'll see a three-dimensional map of downtown Sitka, and you'll notice that there is a blockade, a fort. And it's just of the tiny area of downtown, what is now downtown Sitka. That's not something that shows me in terms of what they felt is their comfort zone of what they claimed to own was all of Alaska. I mean, that was a tiny, tiny area. That's just a few acres of downtown Sitka. Yet they claimed what they claimed and sold what they sold. And it appeared that Tlingit people were mere possessions of something added onto, and perhaps not added value at that in the sale. Nora the Haidas, Tsimshians, Aleuts, Inupiaks, Yupiks, etc., Eaks. And there was a very negative aggression toward Alaska Natives by the American government. They bombarded some villages in Southeast, for example. They instituted laws that claimed that Alaska Natives were aliens. How a First People become aliens on their own land is an interesting psychological discussion, I'm sure. And if you could not own land, then you could not be a citizen. So, the Alaska Natives could not own land either. Alaska Natives could not vote, could not be involved in what was viewed as an integrated education system. I guess we were special. And so there's this action that was systematically implemented by the United States government. As a result, the Alaska Native Brotherhood was formed in Sitka, out of Sitka. And there was other communities that established their own A&B and A&S. I mean, Yakutat, A&B President Burt, once you wave, is here this morning also. And Lorraine, are you with us, A&S? We'll say that she's the head chief of the A&S. And other A&B members around, I know there's other A&B, A&S people that are actively in this community, real active. If you're active in the A&S and the A&B, raise your hand. Give them a round of applause. But the Alaska Native Brotherhood and Alaska Native Sisterhood combined were able to change those laws. Alaska Natives, because of their effort, were no longer considered aliens. Alaska Natives could vote. Alaska Natives could get into integrated school systems. Alaska Natives were also able to get the Equal Rights Law in the 1945 Territorial Senate and House. Signed into law. Keep in mind, it wasn't until what, 1963, that the U.S. Congress was able to act on it? the Civil Rights Bill. I mean, this is 2 years before the nation was able to wake up to that fact and go through that growing pain. Alaska Native Brotherhood, when I think about it, Alaska Native Sisterhood was a phenomenal organization with phenomenal people in it. Not just one that we celebrate once a year, but a whole slew of a number of generations, a few generations, that worked systematically, tirelessly, and let me tell you, very frugally, because nobody had too much money. And they used seine boats to get around. That they were able to address these kinds of things. This historical map and calendar point to a number of other events. Oh, I wanted to also point out that the Alaska Native Brotherhood and Alaska Native Sisterhood combined were able to get the land claims initiated. And I would argue very fervently were able to be an integral part in making it a success in terms of, and as an act of Congress, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. Of course, it wouldn't be a success in terms of an act in Congress without a united front, of which later on the Alaska Native federations were able to, Alaska Federation of Natives was able to put together a unified body. Now, there's a number of other things in the calendar, and I'm going to call on Jeri now. But you can see some of the impact. There was boarding schools. In World War II, Japanese taking the Aleuts, relocating them. The Alcan Road in the World War II from down Lower 48 through Canada up to here. Big impact in terms of accessibility. The statehood, the Molly Hooch schools, Alaska National Interests Lands Conservation Act, the oil pipeline. There was an oil spill, you'll recall that. Canneries, although I think they spell it canaries. Canaries had a big impact. To this day, we're not surviving those canaries. But I wanted to ask you to give a warm welcome to Jeri, because Jeri works with Central Council and is not only familiar with the flip side of that historic events calendar, but also on the other side that has to do with what is the psyche, what is the internal response when our culture is taken away and we don't, as men, have our uncles, our tribal clan uncles to go to get trained by. As women, the young ladies don't have their tribal aunties to go and get trained by. How do we learn our stories? How do we learn our migration stories? How do we learn how to provide from a subsistence lifestyle, or customary and traditional, as we like to call it in Sitka, to a cash economy, when there is a whole system of living, our own tribal government, traditional. I'm not talking about federally recognized. I'm talking about what was traditional. When that is extracted, how are we supposed to adjust to that? Some of it is through alcoholism, drug abuse, abuse of others because of anger. We're left devastated, and it's hard to make that adjustment. Not saying everybody does that, but That is part of the outcome. Abuse of self, abuse of others. With that light note, please give a round welcome to Jeri Museth.
Good morning. My name is Jeri Museth. I work for Tlingit and Haida as the Wellness Coordinator in Tribal Family and Youth Services. I am an eagle killer whale, and that's just about all I can tell you. Yesterday you listened to Lee Florendo, my co-worker, talk, and she talked about losing our children. I was adopted when I was young and came back to Alaska and have been searching for my roots and found some. It's an interesting journey, but it also delays some of the time that you spend being an Alaska Native. It's kind of an interesting room configuration. My good friend Dolores and sister Dolores Cadiente would grab a microphone and walk to the other end of the room and say, okay, everybody turn around. She sort of liked the back of the room to be in the front, I guess. So I kind of like it this way because I could take off my glasses and be in total denial that you're out there. It's an honor to be here. I was volunteered by my supervisor, but it's very humbling to be sitting beside a lady like Nora. Nora said to me that she was a grandmother, so it was time that she was on this side of the mic. Well, unfortunately, I'm a grandmother too, so I guess I have to stand up and I work for Tlingit and Haida as a wellness coordinator, which means that I work in domestic violence, suicide intervention prevention, substance abuse, FASD clinic that diagnoses our children, all kinds of fun activities like that. I have been an ICWA coordinator and worked in permanency there. The violence that sometimes goes on in our homes that is unspoken, the sexual abuse that goes on in our homes that are unspoken, I think is a direct result of some of this historical trauma that we bring down generation after generation. We can't seem to shake that part of it. It's true that we do a lot of substance abuse, but studies have demonstrated that substance abuse doesn't make him hit her or her hit him. The violence is a total different tendency that can occur without the substance in it. That said, substance abuse is not good for our population. We need to figure out how to stop it. Right now, I think that we should be proud of ourselves, and this room should be full of people trying to find out what they can do to regenerate their culture, but it's not. So I guess it's going to be up to us to speak up and bring him in and pack his house next time. And hopefully each one of you will bring 5 more people to sit in these chairs. Tlingit and Haida offers a variety of programs. The ones that I've talked about, we also do TANF. We have tribal vocational rehab. We have education programs. If you go out to the vocational technical center out by the Juneau Community Building. Scholarships are available through various tribes and some of the corporations. I would hope people would be using them. As Lee said, we have ICWA programs. Unfortunately, our workers are terribly overworked. I heard the questions yesterday, but some of you seem to think that the program should be doing more for people. Unfortunately, each worker has about 88 cases. That's a lot more than the state of Alaska has. and they can't manage their program. We also do powerful families. We reach out and try and help people whose families are starting to come apart, teach them how to do parenting, how to do financial management, how to be advocates for themselves. My-rated programs like that. We're working with the Juneau Suicide Task Force. We have a website out there now. You can go on there and look and see how those resources can be assistance if you have someone in your family who is threatening suicide. By all means, if they're exhibiting depression, get them some help. In the school systems lately, they've just been doing some screening to help our kids. Our Native kids score heavy on that. We need to find out why. We often say that our children are our most precious resource, and I just listened to him talk about how when this country was taken over, our resources are what attract them. Our children are a resource, and whether we like it or not, at some point in time when those religious leaders came in, they often use our children. And that sexual abuse was passed on. It still exists. Some of you out there may have heard of the studies in Aucoin Lake, where they had a terrible substance abuse problem. About 95% of those people sobered up in that community. And what they discovered after that was the substance abuse was covering up the sexual abuse that had occurred. I rather suspect that with our people too, we're going to be discovering that same sort of thing, because substance abuse is also just the tip of the iceberg. It's also just a symptom. Historical trauma is carried forward by intergeneration trauma. We move that. We have people in our program like Marilyn Doyle, who has been teaching classes, or will be teaching more of them actually, about knowing who you are. We've done classes on prejudice, racism within the community. Sometimes they were well received, sometimes they weren't. That's one thing that Tlingit and Haida has done. They really trained their employees to try and respond to different things. We do case management. I can do some minimum counseling. We also work hand in hand with Search. Search has a wonderful behavioral program that we encourage people to use. We have some well-variety programs for substance abuse problems, so does Search. Encourage anybody who's having problems within their family to go out and get help, because when you start talking about peace, peace begins within you and then spreads out, and so does anything else. But you're going to have to look back and find out what's happening within you and your family. I was up on the tram a couple years ago, and there was this wonderful little brown ptarmigan hen standing on a log. And when she saw me watching her, she put her head behind a branch, and she felt safe. However, there was a great deal of her anatomy that was sticking out, and I saw her. Unfortunately, we have a tendency to try and hide our heads the same way, and a great deal of our problems are still sticking out there, and others see them. We need to see them. We need to look within ourselves, and that's where on these circles that you see here, that denial portion, we have to move past that, even if it's just little tiny increments at a time. We need to find out that we are sacred, men and women, and that our children are sacred, and help them to live a happier and healthier life. Us too. That's about all I could think of to say.
I have to be a taskmaster here and try and make sure that we finish up by 9:30 because I know they have to pull the wall and get into the other sessions. I did want to call on a couple of people because I know they want to speak and I wanted to point out a couple of things. But right now, we need to move on to is where do we go from here? What is the picture that we are going to strive for, that we're going to create for our children, our grandchildren, and the children who are not born yet? What direction are we going to carve as Tlingit people, as First Nations people of Alaska and Canada? What are we going to do to claim ownership? It is sometimes with what we have in front of us that is the answer. I'm not saying that necessarily the clan conference is the answer, but the answer is in our own communities and a lot of what we're doing. Duane and Sharon gave, I think, a great presentation about the activity that they're doing in their community. And you'll see their act, one of their acts tonight, those of you who are going to go to the tribute dinner to Andy. I'd like to thank my brother Greg, if you want to wave. Greg Littlefield, who brought brother Andy's picture over from what Central Council had it's up here today. But the answer is in our own communities. But we could provide an ongoing forum, perhaps, at your request, at the clan conference, to have dialogue like this. We have a lot of important discussions that happen, and they point to the same thing that we're talking about today, in different ways, though. Native American Graves Repatriation Protection Act. We talk about film that tells our stories. We talk about poetry that reflect the words of our culture. We talk about archaeology. We talk about a lot of Western science-based information. We talk about the blend of our traditional elder knowledge. We talk about our language. And all that is relevant to our discussion today. But how are we going to shape that picture? And perhaps this kind of discussion will cast that overall broad picture and help us shape that picture and pull it together. I don't know if my Aunt Ellen Hope Hayes is here, but she had, after my father, John Hope, passed away, called on me. She called me from her home down in Bridge area outside of Seattle. And basically she, in the great spirit of the Alaska Native Brotherhood, challenged me. She gave me a charge. When you become a member of the Alaska Native Brotherhood, Alaska Native Sisterhood, you get a charge and you get an oath. The charge is to challenge you to do something, challenge you to think a different way, push beyond your norm. And she gave me that kind of charge, a challenge. And that was to establish a Southeast Alaska Native Men's Conference, as she had established and was the founder of the Alaska Native Women's Conference. Because she recognized the role of the Alaska Native male is confused and wandering and does not have a focus. And so when Jeri Museth talks about the abuse of self, the abuse of others, that's an outcome of not having a focus, not having a role. When our traditional role as male men was taken away, nothing was put in its place. Sure, there was a cash economy, but what about the divide between our traditional values and the Western-based education system? How do we reconcile those? We were given a choice, one or the other. And in survival mode, our ancestors at that time chose Western-based education. And because of money, because of oil, because of ANCSA, now Alaska Natives have a place, a recognizable place in the non-natives' eyes because we have money, we have resources, we have land. So now our culture's okay. Now it's okay to get back into our culture. We have celebration here in Juneau every 2 years. So now it's okay for us to talk about this, I think. The time has come. So I'm going to, as part of the picture, work with as president of the Alaska Native Brothers Sitka Camp No. 1, work toward establishing the Southeast Alaska Native Men's Conference. So we can start having a positive future, a positive map for those who are not born yet. And I would argue that it wouldn't be just for men. That sounds like a commercial, sorry about that. Just for men. But it would be good for society in general. They say, and I want to say thank you to Jeri also, because my wife works at the Sitkans Against Family Violence, and she's been there for 20 years, and she works in the field that Jeri works in. And she was planning to be here, but she wasn't able to come over from Sitka. And I wish that she would have been able to, because she would have loved this particular topic. And Louise Brady was going to try and be here too, and she's worked in this field for a while. So, but there's people with skills in their own communities that pave a positive direction. And so I know that we're running out of time, but there's 2 people I wanted to call on, actually 4, 5, 6. You get 3 words each. But I wanted Duane and Sharon just to come forward, just to say a couple of words from the Canadian side, eh? Good exchange, eh?
Good sheesh. I want to thank the Clan Conference and for Jeri to ask us to share part of our story. And I'm very pleased to be here. I was at the 1993 Clan Conference in Haines and Cluckwan, so it's an honor to be here. I live in Descendants. Most of you have probably heard me introduce myself. My name is Sharon Shorty. I'm a Raven Clan, and my Tlingit name, Tlingit Krinach Tsint Yuchat Duasak. The chart that they handed out, I looked at the historical impacts, and I could say that my life and my family and my community has been impacted by probably just about all of those things as well in Canada. And my grandmother, who is Carrie Jackson, her parents are Annie Tom and Shorty Johnston, who were baptized here at the Russian Orthodox Church. And she chose to leave an arranged marriage, and as a result, she was ostracized in her community. So she chose to leave the community, and she chose to hunt for moose because she didn't get provided for by the marriage. Later in years, my mom left her marriage, and she was ostracized, but in a different kind of way. When it came to me, I left an abusive relationship, and I would say that I wasn't ostracized, but the elders didn't like it. But I just chose that I wasn't going to live with abuse in my life in any form. So after I left that relationship, I looked at the landscape, and what I saw in Canada is all you saw about First Nations people or Inuit people is trauma. And that's all the media would focus on. And for myself, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that that wasn't the true picture of my community. What was in my community was humor and stories and love and acceptance and tolerance and I learned all these things from my grandma Zint. And she used to encourage me all the time, even if I would just reach in for a pot above the stove, "Igwach gwan Zint." And if I was packing some water from Teslin Lake, "Igwach gwan Zint." It was just there all the time. And she was the main storyteller in my life. And I was lucky to grow up around the language. And what I remember is always two old ladies sitting and talking in their language and laughing. And I always want to know, what are they talking about? So when it came time for me to try to share this, all those things that I went through, I came up with the idea of two old ladies sitting together, talking and laughing. And so that was the start of Grandma Susie and Sarah. That was myself and Jackie Bear. And the idea was just to sit and have fun and look at our community and laugh at ourselves and laugh at the world, I guess. We performed here in 1996 at the celebration, and I remember it was the dinner with elders. And I tell you, when we went to do that show, we were just shaking. Like, you might have thought that was part of the act, but no, we were scared. Because this is our coastal family. And we do this act to honor my elders, to honor the people that I grew up with. And most recently, I no longer work with Jackie, which is a sad thing, and it's probably due to this historical trauma. But to move on, I decided to pick a Wolfman, because Susie was always trying to get a man, a husband, so she finally got an old man. So it's now Susie and Charlie, and some of you have maybe seen us at the Tlingit Haida Summit, which was in November, and we're happy to come over this side and share more of our comedy. So I'll pass it over to my friend Duane, and he's from my home community. He's opposite clan, and he's single, and and here he is.
Masiiti. I'm not going to do my big long introduction. We don't have much time. My name's Duane. I'm from Teslin, Yukon. I'm Wolf. My clan's Yanyedi, and I'm a white man child and a Deshitan grandchild. But I'm just looking at this whole cycle, this intergenerational abuse. It's not just an Alaskan thing. We got that in Yukon too. So I think we have it everywhere. That's one of the main reasons why I love doing the comedy with Sharon, because there's so much healing in comedy and laughter. But that was another reason what inspired me and my mother to work on that documentary that we just did. It's going to be screened at 10 o'clock in ballroom number 1. But about the intergenerational trauma of residential schools. My mother's a survivor of residential school. So this documentary was me just sitting down with my mom at the kitchen table and listening to her for the first time tell her story to me. And for the first time, she got to hear how it affected me in my words. And I was very lucky that my mom was able to take ownership of her actions and to tell me that she's sorry. And that gave me the strength to tell my 2 kids, they're not biologically mine, but I raised them, so they're my kids. That gave me the strength to be able to sit down with them and tell them my story. This is what got me to where I am today. This is how it affected me, and this is how it affected you, and I'm sorry. And just looking at them with their kids, they're doing a way better job than I did with them, and that my mom did with me. So this healing is happening through the generations. It's taking time, but it's through hakusti'i that what helped my mom and I, and helped my kids and their kids. It's our way. That's where we're going to find our answers and our healing. And that's why it's such an honor to be here today to share this story with you, my Alaskan family, and to hear your stories too, because it also helps me in my healing. And especially, it's such an honor to be here to honor Andy. That he was always such a big supporter of hakusti'i, and he literally put inland Tlingits on the map. That map that he drawn out. He made sure that we weren't forgotten, because many times we get forgotten because we're on the other side of the mountains, but he made sure that Teslin, Atlin, and Carcross were put on that map. So yes, Andy literally put us on the map. So Gunus Chish, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
We're going to have to make a couple of comments brief. I was going to call on David, Sam, real quick, if you want. I noticed you wanted to say a word or two or ask a question, then Barbara, and then this elder wanted to finish it up. So David, while you're making David your way up here, and Barbara, if you'd come forward too, in the interest of time, we wanted to say thank you to Peter Metcalf of Metcalf Communications for purchasing today's pastries. Give him a round of applause, Peter. And we already thanked Kim Metcalf, but he wanted me to thank them again. Kim Metcalf of Hazy Island Books for yesterday's, and then Bambi Kraus for Wednesdays. She represents the National Association of Tribal Historic Officers. Give them a round of applause.
I want to thank all of the panelists for opening up some of the topics of discussion. And I think, first of all, I'd like to see any managers, department heads of Sea Alaska stand up. I'd like to see clan leaders stand up. The clan leaders, stand up, please. Kunshish. I directly ask that in that way because if we're going to be on this path of healing, that if we're going to address these issues, and I appreciated you, Jeri, when you were talking a little bit earlier about, this is not going to be about the whining, that this isn't going to be about the crying. But I have to tell you, when I look at gatherings, who is present and who is not. This forum is for the clan people. It's for us. And are not. I saw the CEO of Sea Alaska this morning in a restaurant, so I know he's in town. I see clan leaders moving about. I know they're here in town, but they don't come. And I have to ask myself, why? And I hear conversations about the politics. But if the people are raising the issues, and I have to tell you, years ago, I was working around HIV and AIDS issues, the human immunodeficiency virus, the acquired immune deficiency syndrome, a disease, a series of sicknesses that you get if you're involved with sexual activity, if you're involved with sharing needles, and that can be passed on to children. That is HIV and AIDS, and I was talking to some of the chiefs that were in attendance at a conference, and I remember this man telling me, or telling the audience one time, I need to go to conferences. I need to hear what the people are talking of. And I have to tell you, when I look around and I ask, where are the decision makers? Where are the clan leaders? And it's good to see a few here. Where are they? That's a part of the sickness. And that will keep us from addressing these issues. But I wanted to say that in this way, without offense to anybody. Kunshish.
Good morning, and I hope not to take too much time. I'm standing behind a great man, his portrait, Gerry Hope. And as I sat here listening to the opening remarks, it was Andy's spirit that helped me stand here to say what I have to say with regard to the comments that I heard this morning. And I say that because Andy certainly went to where the tension is. He went and looked down into the mouth of that volcano, and he spoke with what he saw. And I asked my nephew, Philip Blattner, to come stand with me to give me strength, because the words I'm about to say, I hope do not fail him, or my sons, or my husband, or my brothers, or my, particularly the clan leader, Frank Jack in Angoon at the Chinook Hit, and also the clan leader, Willard Jackson, who's here. My name is Barbara Cadiente Nelson. My Tlingit name is Eshkoka. I'm Te Koidi. I stand as a grandchild of the Tlingit. My father was adopted into the Dog Salmon clan by my uncle, Walter Sobolov. My grandfather's name is Shaikak John Hunter, and my great-grandfather's name is Taka William George. Today we heard many comments, as should be spoken, about what is the future of our men. I'd like those men to stand up. Now, all men, please stand. Even non-native, please stand. Goodness, Chish, I honor each of you, and let me say this, and thank you for continuing to stand. Many of you have served your country with such dignity and honor, and we look to you as women of the earth. We look to you as your leaders. You may have been displaced by rules and regulations, but you're here. You prioritized your time to be here to say this matters. We matter as a traditional people, as Indigenous people. And so I honor you. Thank you for standing. Many of you I've met on the sea fishing. If my husband were standing next to me, who's Aleut and also adopted into the Dog Salmon clan, he could name off a litany of fishing boats, and you'd say, okay, now we're talking. Because those are the icons of our history, because as Indigenous people, labor is our dignity. It's our dignity. I received a phone call the other day from my sons who are fishing in Sitka. They're permit holders. They're one of the very few native permit holders in the Sitka Sacro fishery. And my son, who's 26 years old, said, Mom, tell me how to get to my center. Pray for me. And I said, it's within you. It's within you. Look inside. If you have prepared yourself spiritually, then those fish will come to you, just as the crab have, just as the deer that you've hunted have, just as the halibut and the black cod have. It will come to you. Prepare yourself. Your grandfathers are with you. And remember, and always remember, that this is a privilege. It's a privilege that you carry. You're the very few commercial fishermen that represent our people, our men who have labored for us. I have my bachelor's and my master's degree, and it wasn't from the benefits of ANCSA, because I never could qualify for a scholarship. I may have had one, but I was raising my family, and I couldn't go to school and get a scholarship on part-time attendance. I was also fishing, running the business. I faced many storms. I've been in your waters from Yakutat all the way to Prince of Wales. Many times I didn't think me or my family could come back. But I was just a deckhand. I was hiding behind the captain and my sons. Some of your grandsons are out there. I could name off Knut Felipe, Pat Florendo. They're out there. They may not be permit holders, but labor is their dignity. They're fishing. So what do we do as a people? You talk about displacement. On that cycle of abuse is limited entry, 1971. It fleeced our men of permits to provide for their families. I could say much more, but I'm going to close in the interest of time by why I asked my nephew who's been sitting, he wanted to come up closer so he could hear, and he's been so mindful and listening. He's learning Tlingit in the Tlingit immersion program here in Juneau. He's learning who he is. And when I said I didn't want to fail him or my sons, it's because his grandfather in the other room yesterday was interviewed, and he stood, his grandfather is Clarence Butch Leidy, Yanye D. He is the last permit holder that fishes the Taku waters, his ancestral lands. And in his interview, Butch said, he pointed to his grandson Philip, and he said, I have to carry this well because he's the one who follows me. My brother-in-law, as my husband and sons do, take the first of their catch and they provide for our elders, our community, and they're proud to do that. When they go hunting and they bring back the deer, that's where it goes, not into the freezer, it goes to our neighbors, our elders. And so as we toss around words of money and wealth, we're rich people. We shouldn't be afraid of even the dollar. We have to claim that too. We're wealthy, all of us are wealthy. We have so much, and we're not going to lose. But I ask you, as you speak to the issues of the herring subsistence fishery, commercial fishery, and I'm sorry I said the word subsistence, our way of life, our most precious foods, our sustenance, that you also be mindful that there are men out there that are trying to provide for their children, their wives, their in-laws, and they're in a violent world. And let me just take one more second. I'm an educator. I work in the school district, and let me tell you, as a teacher, I've had graffiti carved on my desk, on my whiteboards, on my car. I returned to the scene of the crime where my spirit was damaged as a child to make it better for my children and my children's children. I know racism. I know what it tastes like. I've been spit at. I know what it feels like. I've been hit. I know what the words do to a person's spirit. But as a commercial fisher, I've heard the words on the Channel 16 about our native fishermen. Lazy, good for nothing. If they wanted to fish, they'd be out here. And yet here are the few fishermen that are out there knocking their socks off, and I'm proud of my husband, I'm proud of my sons, and I'm proud of my nephews and those we employ from Yakutat all the way down to the Prince of Wales. And that's what drives our engine, labor, the dignity of our men to work and provide for their families. So thank you. And again, to the Hope family, I honor all of you. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if Andy hadn't taken the risk to move out and say, I'm not waiting for Sea Alaska. I'm not waiting for anybody to hold my hand. I'm going to get out there and do it because he too saw a future for our children that's a good future. So Ganesh Cheesh for your time.
Thank you, Barbara. We don't have any more time. We are way over. I thought we'd be done by now. They do need a half hour to make sure to adjust the room. There's an elder here that wanted to speak. We will make time as we go through the day. So I really apologize that we went over, and especially to the next session. Thank you. Good